Welcome to Huge Fans. This is another episode of Huge Fans with Knack Entertainment. We're going to dive in deep on Pixar.
Ooh.
Nice.
So I actually want to, just go ahead and give an intro for everybody. I'm Ed.
I'm Catherine.
I'm Liz.
And John.
All right. So that's all Knack members represented, ready to dive in deep on Pixar. Pixar's got like a great, huge, wide variety of styles of movies and storytelling that they've done over, however many years, 20 plus years, almost 30 years. Their first movie that they came out with, although first full computer animated feature, Toy Story, isn't really where their story starts. I mean, they did animation called Luxo Jr., which was nominated for an Academy Award, which was that little bouncing lamp and ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that basically kind of was their entry point to show Disney that they could really fully do full animated features.
Yeah, it was sort of their proof of performance. That,
and they're been wanting to do that for a while and been doing, commercial work and special effects for movies and things like that, but never diving in as big as they had with Toy Story. But that's I think that's our starting point, not the full deep back history of Pixar, but like Pixar as the feature film making company that we
really talking
spent
about.
time with.
And that's when they were actually independent of Disney.
Right,
So they weren't
originally.
owned by Disney at that point. That was Steve Jobs. And up in, Northern California, Emeryville, right? It's like outside of San Francisco. It's so not in the Hollywood, arena by any means, and not part of Disney or any other big animation company. So
And, bits and pieces from Disney and all those other big movie studios that came together at Pixar, but not traditional, like, actual movie studio people, yeah.
No, supposedly, I read this great book because I know Catherine and myself, like, I loved Disney Wars. I loved The Ride of a Lifetime by Robert Iger, who's the head of Disney for many, many years. But then I picked up this book, To Pixar and Beyond. And I was like, oh, it's going to be like the history of Pixar. From the perspective of the CFO. What? So a little different angle, but still sucked me in because I love all that. And you really think about like the humble beginnings of
the beginning, the
David and Goliath level.
for sure.
Yeah.
The idea that they, started with basically one traditional animator who knew nothing about computers, and then like two computer guys kind of, and then got Steve Jobs to invest. I think it was like $10 million was the first investment. And then Steve Jobs, I think over the course of 3 or 5 years, lost basically like $1 million a year as they were making these short films, trying to prove that because it was an unproven thing that you could make movies in a computer. And I think, luckily they got pushed into trying to do special effects for movies. So somehow we're correlated with Lucas and ILM and doing Jurassic Park dinosaurs. And
I don't know if that was because they were up north. They were like practically neighbors.
They were in the,
They were part of the Silicon Valley, like, computing stuff.
Yeah. And technology, like advancing the technology and showing what was capable.
Yeah.
Render Man.
Yeah. What a
Render Man.
Render Man was like their original software that they would license out and that other people would use to render stuff that made it into movies. I actually used it in school very badly one semester. And that's all the time I spent on Render Man. It's a very, very complicated piece of software.
At SCAD.
Yeah, at the Savannah College of Art and Design, where I went to college and got a computer art degree, which I'm heavily using in this podcast.
Yeah, no.
No, not applicable. No.
Yeah, I just love that they really were such a small team to begin with, and I think there are stories that like we had one computer and took shifts, and like I did most of it between 3 and in the morning, and like before everyone came in, and then I slept under my desk. Like, what are you talking about?
Because it was a true startup, but backed by Steve Jobs. So and everybody was looking at him because at that time he was having all the issues with Apple. So he was putting a lot of eggs in the basket of Pixar to be successful, sort of to prove that he could make another huge success out of something.
Well, that, and also looking at computers to do things that people hadn't really looked at computers to do, and thinking that like, no, they could make movies.
And storytelling. You could take something that is analoged and doesn't have emotions, and in a way, it's going to be able to do all that. And it's like, how? Like, what?
Well, it's funny because it seems like, how was that such a stretch when you think about that's what animators do? So the idea that like it would be so shocking to think like, but could they do it with a computer? It's like, what? It's just a different tool. It's not, if they can learn how to work in the computer, they can do it. Their skill as animators is what they're actually using.
Well, but I remember, computers were barely being used for anything.
Yeah, for sure.
So this was a huge expansion in doing art, and not just, I drew this thing, but now I'm going to program it to partially draw for me, I think is maybe the big step.
Yeah, well, there were a couple in between steps of like, there was definitely, they first realized like, we can use the computer to do all of the backgrounds and then program the camera, but then we'll still hand draw the characters. And then I think there was another stage where they realized, we can have the computer make the in-between drawings. Like, we'll still draw some of the animation, but the computer then can figure out the drawings in between. This was before they really fully realized, like, oh no, we can just do all of it in the computer.
Well, there's also a big difference in visual special effects where you're trying to marry something to the shot that was actually shot, like the plate that you're putting the effects onto, versus building the entire environment and having it read like those things are in that environment. There's something that RenderMan does that nothing else was doing at the time, which is kind of why Pixar is the beginning of full-featured computer animation movies. It's called ray tracing. It's very boring. I'm not going to get into it, but the whole point is the computer's doing a lot of this work which we take for granted while watching film, that light filters in and bounces around and hits off of all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. So like dust motes and specks in the environment in the room, that was something they added to this that made like Toy Story as a starting point. I think there's not carpet anywhere, which makes things easier. The
texture would have been,
something that you learn as you dive in deep on a company like Pixar is every movie that they did was a new exploration of a style of animation that they were trying to do, or they were trying to get hair to look
like
good.
a challenge.
It was every movie is a challenge for the animators prior to that, and there's usually a short film where that's where they finally got the hair to actually look like it was attached to the head and blowing around in the wind. My favorite one is the short with all the birds, and there's just like one giant weird long neck bird. It's like, hey, what's up, dudes? It sits on the telephone pole. Every single one of the birds dip into it. But that short, Birds of a Feather, which is further down their catalog, that was to try to get the squish factor of the fat and the skinny birds, how those shapes played against each other, especially if you had like feathers and things that you also wanted to shape and move. So, and then also like, how would things happen if you launched all of those? All the feathers stay, the birds like there without their feathers. There's all sorts of fun bits and pieces that they would play through and experiment on so that they could use that in the full version of the movie.
Well, it's interesting because, shorts really were sort of where they proved themselves to begin with, and won, I think, at least 2 Academy Awards for short animation films, and that was sort of their beginning. But it's interesting to think about that they also used it to work out problems that they would then apply to much bigger projects, and then also just try and figure things out while working on those projects, which...
Well, yeah, it's things that you wouldn't necessarily take for granted as like, everybody can do that now. No one's thinking about how hard is it to animate fabric.
Yeah.
They delved into that problem. They're like, it's real hard. It looks like it's covered in static cling, basically, until you figure out how to animate it correctly.
Yeah, hair, fabric. I think we'll do something a little bit more in order, but I want to jump to in The Incredibles for sure. They talked about like there was a little documentary that I watched on Pixar in preparation for this, and one of the things they talk about in it was like, oh yeah, we're like, okay, now we need to deal with hair and fabric underwater and like what have we done to ourselves? Like this
and
is
the stretchy mom looking like she doesn't have glass on her head that looks like wet hair. Oh, that's hard. That's real hard.
Yeah.
We're gonna become good at that, and then we're gonna put that in the movie. Oh, okay,
amazing.
Great.
And I do love the shorts. I mean, the shorts are. I've actually been able to visit. Now it jumps to collaboration with Disney, but that is where you can sort of present a small encapsulation of a story that they can take wide in some ways, but the elements as well. I mean, like Lifted. I don't know if you've seen that one where it's like basically a UFO is going to take a body, a human body. And I remember them talking about how, being able to get a human body that's asleep, that's like schlumpy and moving and this and like, how do you do that? And it seems like everything, all those things they would learn would translate and then to the features.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Well, let's talk about that. So Toy Story was their first feature, and they were teamed basically with Disney as not 50-50 partners, but Disney was taking on the promotion and the distribution. And it was an interesting relationship because it allowed them to make the movie, which was a huge challenge, but then they had this much more robust company that was going to take it out there and put all their steam behind it. And, it's funny to think they had no idea if it was going to work.
Oh.
They had they were like, did this even, and I know that in this documentary, they were talking about the pre-screeners, like they would do these like test sequences and literally it's Roy Disney going like, yeah, I'm watching this going, is this going to work? Like what? And like close to deadline. And then like all of a sudden, they'd get the final piece of the render or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden it was all there. And he was like, oh my God. Oh, okay. This, now I see it. But before it was like, wireframes and like, half render things. Just like,
I mean, nowadays, although we're all in the industry, that's something a lot more of the populace is aware of. Wireframes and previs and like not the finished rendered look of stuff. And it's like we got a lot more exposed to how all of that works. But executives back in the day when they're like, yeah, what are we paying for? I can't see this yet. Why is this all
happen?
one color?
Yeah, they've pulled back the curtain, sort of the process, the creative process. So most people do understand that. And there was an amazing exhibit here in California, which probably traveled throughout the United States, that I took a couple kids to, thinking it was going to be much more like Pixar fun. And it was like how the technology of Pixar works. So it was like a bunch of
How to sit in a chair for 20 hours every day.
Yeah, 8-year-olds were not as engaged in it, but as an adult, it was fascinating to see the process and understand it more and go, wow, that is a lot of work.
yeah, what a leap. I mean, to really believe that they could do this and pull it off.
And Buzz Lightyear and Woody, and then that partnership with Disney, then the marketing and the merchandising. And no one knew what Pixar really was before then. And it was such a unique voice and a departure from the sort of more traditional Disney movies.
Yeah, well, I think they purposefully had said that they were not going to do songs. It was not going to be a musical, which was already like it did have a very iconic song in it, used in it, but none of the characters were singing.
Right.
Which was a very Disney
And what's really interesting? I'm just thinking about that because the idea of pairing up with Disney, who's a huge corporation and has so many things that they do besides animations, they absolutely understand marketing. They understand how to sell stuff and the side avenue of selling toys for the thing that you're marketing for. That's an extra great business. Getting in bed with a company called Toy Story would seem like that's a great marriage. What are your character designs? A 1950s cowboy and every toy that a kid would already have.
Well, it's interesting too because
very weird to have not come up with a new thing for this entire movie. All of it's known entities.
Well, Buzz Lightyear was completely new. I mean, my son ended up getting, he had a Woody and a Buzz Lightyear for quite a few years. I will still say it goes back to Steve Jobs. Like, he wasn't trying to put this initially through the Disney lens that would have been like, what's the ride? What's the toy?
Right,
what's
right,
the
right.
this? He was, what's the technology? Can we do it? Can we
Yeah.
prove it? And then the more and more it became, yes, we can. It's like, then you get someone like Disney behind it, but he still controlled it at that point.
Yeah,
it
I
was
think-
his company and his vision.
I think
Oh,
the what ended up not working out so great for Pixar, which they remedied later, was that they didn't own any of they didn't retain any of the merchandising rights for those characters, and then they additionally got into a little bit of a
Kerfuffle.
sticky situation where Disney was like, okay, thanks for those characters, we're now going to do straight to video.
Oh,
Which didn't end up happening.
only because number 2, now there was Bug's Life in between, which addresses so much of what you talked about. It was like water droplets, leaves,
Testing
lights,
out so
like,
much stuff
ay,
to
ay.
like get the next level up from Toy Story, right?
But for sure, because back in the day, the DVD game in Disney was huge. And a lot of times the sequel never lives up to the original. And so they were kind of
For
going
sure.
along that narrative. So Toy Story 2, and the book that I read, definitely says this was the thought process. They didn't think it was going to be as good or successful. And then they realized, oh boy, it's going to be
Amazing.
So now we need to do a theatrical release. So, and it was also partnered with Disney. So it's just fascinating, sort of the impact of like what would be merchandising, marketing, behind the scenes. But
And you also, there's a business model behind the sequel not being as expensive or well animated as the original. I think Aladdin 2, Jafar's, mystery, whatever that one was.
what? How dare you?
Not
Oh
the
my-
same caliber of
Uh-huh.
time, energy, shading, etc., etc. Something that's crazy great and fun to love about Pixar, when you get into the Pixar universe, where all these movies might be connected, they might be still, etc.,
Sure,
etc.
sure.
From Toy Story 1 to A Bug's Life, the reason why those movies are connected and something you wouldn't be able to do in a traditional animated feature like Tarzan to, I don't know, Beauty and the Beast. You can't take animation of a hand-drawn animated cell and essentially fully reuse it. Disney definitely recycled animation previously, but no one had been able to fully, completely reuse a designed character in its entirety in another feature. It's like having a set and then shooting something else on the same set. You have gained all the value of the time and energy that got put into building that set. All of the Toy Story stuff that they do is CG, so it can move into the next project. Fully
All of that programming of
all
that character,
built,
yeah.
everything that they figured out, all the problems that they figure out from one movie to the next, they bring that along into the next movie. So some of the reasons why you'll see those first couple movies with repeated things in them, like the Pizza Planet truck from Toy Story, that's in A Bug's Life, because it's already a built model. They don't have to make another model. It's just easy. But then it ties all those movies together. But it also is like that thing where, yeah, we can keep doing this. And at the level that you already executed this one on, you could just move those files into the next movie and use them there, and they're as good a quality. It's not like hiring the animators again to draw them again. Oh, okay. Yeah, we can do really good ones.
And this is why animation. These are supposed to be kids movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are ageless and timeless. And really, it was also that experience of where, as a parent, and Catherine, you can relate, you take your kid to the latest movie because it's something to do, and you're sitting there as an adult like, ugh. Toy Story was one of those ones you sat there and went like, I'm enjoying this. There are some adult references. There's little things like that maybe I would catch, but my kid is not catching that they've used the Pizza Planet truck twice. They're not catching it. So
It's also not a classic story. Disney delved into classic stories a lot. This is a brand new story, too.
Right. Well, although, there's no father really present in Toy Story, we didn't have the classic Disney trope, which is like a parent has to die, usually to set off the Hulk, or you're an orphan or something.
Well, Pixar does their fair share of that.
Yes,
later,
I agree. But yes, it was Toy Story was a little outside that box, and just sort of the meta character of Buzz Lightyear not realizing who he was so genius. They're like, oh, you think you're really
Yeah, you're real.
Buzz Lightyear. I mean, it was, as an adult, I still will like line up my kids' stuffed toys, and there is a little part of me. It's like, sorry guys, I'm cramming you together. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
It's that funny thing where you're like, you put a toy down, a doll or whatever, down, face down on something. You're like, oh, that's rude. You like flip
I
it
do.
over.
It
No,
has
you can't do
impacted
that.
me.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right. So to jump forward a few, because there's Monsters Inc. was, I thought, another just so inventive storytelling, but taking the classic, there's a monster under your bed.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And also the backstory on that, so much fun. Because, like, the premise of it is that monsters are sneaking under your bed and they're going to scare you and they're going to collect some screams. And that's how they power their universe. Okay, fine. But then one of the animators or directors or whoever's kid it was, that's like the voice of Boo, is, yeah, every one of those animators, that's the life that they're going through. They've got kids that are like traumatized by monsters on the bed. My kid thinks of a lizard under the bed. Well, that's what you're animating today. Or
But
the next
then
6 months.
A story of friendship and jealousy and ambition and all those elements. I mean, the one-eyed Mike. I mean, just like he's so Billy Crystal. I mean, I wish there was a category for Academy Awards for voice, like in animation, because he was able to have one eye and his voice expressed so much frustration, ambition. He'd be rageful. I mean, just he's so, the whole cacophony that he would bring to the character.
Oh, so good.
What's the song?
Put that thing right back where it came from, or so help me.
Here, why don't you try again? Yeah.
That's right. Put that thing
Put that thing right back where it came from, or so help me. It's a whole musical that they're doing, John.
Oh god.
Obviously, they were practicing.
Oh, so good. Oh my gosh.
Although I do believe that actually comes back as a reference later in one of their sequels.
Mm.
And the bad guy is omnipresent and kind of the closest thing to a monster we've really had in the Pixar movies at that point, where it's not.
Well, I mean, Sid is a monster, but we can skip over that.
For sure. Toy Story. Yeah, exactly. And then I think they go back to something where, realism, which is the Finding Nemo, where, they had to create, I think the water was a huge thing, right? I mean, I think I watched a documentary, or maybe it was at an exhibit that I went to at the museum, where they delved into the fact that the water.
It's like the depth of the water and how much light is translated through from the top to how deep you go. It's like a gradient the entire time, but it's a volumetric gradient. So animating inside that, it was like, yeah, no one's animating underwater. Yeah, Pixar is.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to that whole, like, each movie, they realized they had a different challenge that they were like, I think, with monsters, they talk about like, that was the first time we tried to do fur. And we really were like, we want them to be fur. Oh God, do we want them to be fur?
Right,
this is so hard.
Sully's
Because toys, I mean, like
fur.
a shiny, like they really hadn't dealt with fabric. Very
texture.
Yeah. So Sully's fur being like their first, like, oh, okay, let's see if we can pull this off. And then water.
Ooh, kitty.
And then dealing with water and just being like, okay, so this is our next thing.
Oh my gosh. And they did the classic Disney thing. I mean, sorry, like we say, there's always spoiler alerts in our episodes of Huge Fans. So sorry. A parent dies at the beginning of Finding Nemo. There is tragedy. They were like, let's get back in that Disney and really traumatize these kids.
And as long as you're traumatized, here's a cool turtle. What's up, dudes?
Oh, I think my favorite might be the seagulls. Mine.
They were great.
And now, if you see a seagull, you're like, are they saying that? Yeah, I mean, it's just, it starts to get, now you're quite a few films in and you're starting to realize this is like going to be the fabric of our lives in some way, like how impactful
Oh,
it
for
will be.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And Ellen DeGeneres did awesome. Albert Brooks. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
And it was that type of storytelling where you could have fear and you could have elements of even disability. They were taking on bigger topics in their storytelling and through a unique lens of the animation and their characters.
I'm sure that this isn't the case. I'm just fantasizing that these are conversations executives had at Disney and Pixar. That at some point, Disney executives were like, you need a bad guy. We need like a monster in your movies. I don't know what y'all been doing. We need some monsters. That's our jam. We like to scare the F out of kids. Really put a monster in there. Just have the mom of your main character turn into a dragon. Just do something. Give us something. And they're like, so what we're going to do is we're going to show you how getting kids to scream as your power source is the wrong energy. Getting them to laugh is better. We're just going to write a script and not call it Disney scaring kids to death as the business model. No, we're not. Well, we're just going to lightly touch on it's very obvious if you think about okay.
And then they got back to, the humans.
Exactly. They went back to the positive side of stuff and making fun of everyone on the entire planet for just not having a sense of appropriateness by and large.
I think what's interesting about...
you're skipping ahead a little bit. I think we were on Incredibles.
Yeah,
we already talked about Incredibles. Go ahead.
No, we didn't talk about The
No, we
Incredibles.
didn't.
That's one of my favorite movies ever.
It's amazing. I was going to say, what I think is so interesting about Incredibles is that's Brad Bird. And he was the first person or first director brought in. So the first directors were all
in-house.
Early Pixar employees. Like they were part of that first wave of I think it was like the first 5 people hired, and 3 of them are the directors that it's John Lasseter and I want to see Pete Docter.
Yep.
And then Finding Nemo is Andrew Stanton, and they were literally like the first 3 animators that were hired, and then. They had huge hit after huge hit after huge hit.
I mean, the pressure
is an
alone.
anomaly in the business. It's virtually impossible to do. And then they bring in Brad Bird, who had done 2D animation. What was it? Iron Giant, I think. Iron Giant,
which is an incredible movie.
But knew nothing about computer animation. And now Pixar is a big company. I think they'd moved to their campus at that point. So he's coming into this big machine. And, a lot of pressure to be like, okay, don't break our streak, man. But also, what do you got?
You're jumping into a culture there.
Yeah.
And how do I put my stamp on this but maintain the success?
Well, it's an interesting because that was like the first, it was their second chapter. Because their second chapter was this feature film, string. But now we're 15 years later or more.
It took a while. Mm-hmm.
And I will say The Incredibles, it's a story of a family, but it also kind of sends up what, has become a huge dominant, the superpower, the
genre,
the superhero
genre.
Sends it up. I mean, just that opening thing of where, because if you watch any Avenger, or any of the Marvel, there's a lot of destruction to
for sure.
save. And that send up right from the beginning. Like I said, once again, as an adult sitting there, your kid's not really getting all these references, but you as the adult of who the hell does pay for all of that? You cause more destruction. And I loved, just the family dynamic of the relationship of Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible, Bob, and oh my God. I mean, Holly Hunter's voice and, Bob, which was surprising because, this is one of those things that's awesome about animation. It's somewhat ageless because obviously these actors could have never been cast in
Craig T. Nelson, the voice is so perfect.
But he was in his 60s or later when he started this. So there's absolutely no way,
well, he's not going to play a superhero, Mm-hmm.
But his rich tones were so perfect and where he could kind of, he really was able to, as, a superhero down on his luck.
I mean,
his despondency, his depression.
Him in the cubicle, he's so humongous in that
the
little debt. I mean,
proportions,
it's so great. Oh, wait, Samuel L. Jackson. Where's my super suit? I mean, come on. He so good.
And then you have the kids Dash and Violet portraying all of her emotions. And
God, I just think of Violet's hair.
The shrinking Violet? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
yes.
That hair. I mean, like, again, talking about like they had to figure out like how are we gonna make that hair work, and then her curtain of hair over one eye. You're like, you guys
But they
nailed
did
it.
you know what's interesting? I don't know when it was supposed to be because it had almost a 1950s, but yet Jetson vibe to it, where it was a very cool modern aesthetic.
Yeah, it was updated but out of time a little bit.
Yeah.
Like you weren't sure what they were trying to, which works incredibly well. And isn't that the super house? Isn't that like an homage to what's that house that's like all concrete up on the Hollywood Hills looking over a bluff? You've done like
Yes. Oh gosh. I'll think of it just in one moment.
I don't know
I've done photo shoots there. It's super. It's very modernistic. It's
The Sheets Goldstein residence?
yes. So the Goldstein I think was the architect. No. For those of you that in LA, there is a character that sits courtside at all the Laker games, and he wears leather head to toe, and
Yeah, that's Goldstein.
that's Goldstein. So I thought
But John Lautner.
a
that's-
Lautner house, right?
Yeah.
oh, the Lautner house.
So
Is
he
that what
bought
it's
a
called?
house
Mhm.
in the Hollywood Hills, a John Lautner house, and primarily in order to the ongoing renovations that constantly has to happen there, and it is super sci-fi, like futuristic feeling when you go to do photo shoots there. And I've been lucky
Did they
to go
use it
to-
in The Big Lebowski? I
They
think they
did
also
use The
used
Big
it in The
Lebowski.
Big Lebowski.
That was very
Mhm.
inappropriate for a
Oh,
Pixar
sorry. I know. I'm
episode.
sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a different episode,
But
you
they
guys.
did.
Sorry.
So yes, the Sheet Goldstein, but it's the Lautner house, and yes, I think that was inspiration. And speaking of inspiring, one of my favorite
Oh.
all-time animated characters ever, darling,
Ever.
Edna E. Mood.
And that is Brad Bird. Didn't Brad Bird voice
Yes.
Edna Mode? Which is amazing.
Edna Mood.
Edna
Oh,
Mode.
darling. Oh my God. Just,
Quickly, before I change my mind.
just the sunglasses, and I mean, the inspiration. You're going like, was it a send up of, Vogue Anna Wintour mixed with like three other people because
Yeah.
the Bob
There's
and,
also like a very
oh.
famous costume designer that it might have been.
Edith
Head?
Head.
No.
Head.
Okay, yeah. There's on Disney Plus, which so much of this is available
Available.
right now
Yeah.
on Disney Plus, which is amazing. They also have, I think it's called Inside Pixar. It's a series of short documentary films. They're like, 12
Nice,
minutes
yeah.
long or whatever, about different aspects of Pixar. So some of them are about the campus or people who work there. And there's one that's about a character animator, this woman. Oh, her name I can't remember at the moment. That episode, I think it's like, I think there's 20 episodes and she's number 4 or 5 or something. And she designed a lot of stuff for The Incredibles, and her personal style is also really interesting. Like she wears
Oh.
all vintage clothes and like, oh my God, she was amazing. I highly recommend.
No capes.
I
mean-
highly recommend this series. But she was amazing and talked a lot about designing for Edna Mode, and unfortunately this sequence didn't make it into the movie. But I guess she designed a fashion show for Edna Mode. And I was like, what? Oh my God, I just love it so much. Anyway, she was fascinating, and the Edna Mode aspect of it was fantastic.
Sounds like that's a whole bunch of backstory that like an actor would normally prepare, but this is now an animator who's like, I need a backstory for this character. She had a fashion show, and then from that fashion show, she decided no more capes. And that's where we start in this movie.
It's possible. I mean, they do it from.
Well, just that they decided to do a character that designs the suits
Is amazing.
And that they went down that trajectory, And, oh, darling, your ass has gotten big, or whatever the hell she says to Helen, like, darling, luck, favors never prepared. I mean, just like so. I mean, that is where you go. Okay, Pixar is operating at a level that is appealing to multiple ages, taste levels, aesthetics. Like they're reaching.
Well, and
they're
I
not
think-
just doing kiddie, like trying to just do kiddos.
Yeah, and for sure, I think their process, which is very it takes a long time to make these movies. They sometimes say that, the shortest might be 3 years, but the longest could be 6 years.
Yeah.
There's so many, from script to revision to script, like there's so much that goes into it, and so many people are involved in what ends up being in the movie. It's not just one person writes the script. And I mean, it sounds like an insane process, but they're not just going to somewhere and shooting something. So there's so many people involved. So you wonder if part of why there's so many layers and textures, it's because it's such a collaboration with 15 different people and then 16 different departments, and everybody's going to have a little bit of say and just make it that much richer each time.
I mean, we could just do a whole huge fans on, I think, on
The Incredibles?
The Incredibles.
Yeah, apparently we
Syndrome,
can.
my husband and I will quote him, even though I almost forgot. I stopped giving him credit for it a long time ago, but Syndrome, I'll give you credit for it. You sly dog, you got me monologuing. We do that all the time. And it's like, that's
you sly
him.
dog, you've got me monologuing.
Yeah, so
Monologuing.
that was script, characters, visual, knock
Everything.
out of the park, home run. So, all right, so Ed,
All right.
Yeah,
so
what's next?
from The Incredibles, something that we really got to explore in The Incredibles was transportation.
Oh.
They fly around a lot on their things. They're driving around. They're drilling through the ground and things like that. And Pixar's like, we're just going to do all cars.
You know what?
We're just going to do an entire universe where that's what's living. One of the best parts about Pixar features is how deep and rich they build out their universe. So the reference I made earlier that they're using these models that are already built in the next movie, which makes it easier. You don't have to build them from scratch. But then it kind of ties a lot of these together. Something that I feel like I'm the only person that ever talks about it. And it actually is at Pixar Land, Cars Land at Disney, California Adventures, that there are giant, old cars stacked as though they're the mountain peaks. And if you really pay attention, it's kind of like, oh, that's almost
Like
like
the
a
back
junkyard.
end,
Like
right?
a junkyard
Oh.
would stack cars because they don't have enough room. So you just stack these cars that you're never going to get around to. So then it's just the tail ends of all these cars coming up. It looks like the planet that Cars is on is 20 million years in the future, and these are
Prehistoric
cars.
cars.
AI cars that are alive 20 million years in our future, and the cars that we put in the actual dump right now have turned into stone and become the mountains of this
They're
future.
petrified
They're
cars
petrified
from the
cars
past.
from
Oh, that's so
our
interesting.
current time in the future of their world. Obviously, that's not the case because we've seen, and I've already referenced this movie too early before, by and large. It's not the directions things go in. But I do really like that they build up this world and this universe, and you can get really deep into Cars with the bugs that fly around are usually, if they show you close enough to see the actual bugs, it's tiny Volkswagen Beetles with wings on them flying around. There's all sorts of weird,
all cars.
tiny
It's
little
all cars,
detailed
people.
stuff.
It's all cars.
Well, and what I definitely didn't know until later, just looking up random research, but Dan Fogelman, Mr. This Is Us, eventually.
Oh my God!
This
Wow.
is one of his first, movie. Well, because he did some TV, but then this was his first movie. Was
Oh, he
as a writer,
directed-
no,
oh.
writer on Cars.
Oh.
Writer on Cars. I did not know that. Oh, interesting.
He had a little bit. It wasn't all kids. There Fred Claus in there, but then Bolt, Tangled, and Cars 2. So there was
Oh.
a little kids run. for
Bolt,
him.
not Pixar, but I do love
I do love Bolt.
Yeah.
That is so tied to your children because
It's true. It was the timing of it.
Pixar is like, okay, adults are gonna watch it. Other kids' movies sometimes you miss. I missed Bolt, so you guys will reference
What
it.
the
I'm
hell
like,
are you talking about?
okay.
Bolt, what?
All right.
All right, so next up is Ratatouille. Yes, please, Ratatouille. Oh my God!
Didn't they just open the Ratatouille? I think it's in Florida. They just opened a
don't know.
whole Disney World based
About
on
Remy.
Remy Ratatouille.
I went to Disney Paris for the one weekend that I went to Paris. I made time to go to Disney because that's what you should do when you're in the City
You
of
should-
Lights
you
is to
probably
go
should.
to the animated capital of the
Well.
third animated. This is the Disney Paris. Yeah, it was an experience, but we're not going to talk about that. the fact that there was already a Pixar land at Disney Paris. It was not exactly an official, this is a Pixar land, but there was a Toy Story Slinky Dog roller coaster. There was a remote control car, like back and forth swinging thing. So like it would hit the middle and vroom, and the remote control car would send it. So you're like swinging back and forth. But there was an entire Ratatouille Remy restaurant closed for the special event that they were there for the day. But the ride, it's my absolute favorite ride I've ever been on at any park anywhere. And I've only been to like 4 parks. So it's not a lot of parks.
But I mean, we are Disneyland kids
Yeah.
because, we grew up here. So
I'll describe the ride and then we can get back to the actual movies. Because although I'm sure Pixar was involved, this is much more a Disney parks kind of love fest. But the ride itself puts you in the position and perspective of Remy. You are a rat in a kitchen running around trying to help get things done. And it is a projection theater, like, a teacup, like scooching around the kitchen. But you literally are the size of a rat seeing wheels in the kitchen and people walking because it's all projection screens that you're going underneath. It's like my absolute favorite.
Oh, wow.
That's a Brad
ride
Bird, too.
because it just puts you right into like,
Movie.
I'm the size of a rat. This is this is amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
it reminds
cool.
me just of, speaking of parks, because Disneyland is here and California Adventure really has pivoted towards becoming more of a Pixar park. Like
that was one of the longest lines I ever stood in ever.
what for cars. Yeah.
It was like I couldn't even do the math. It was like you walk up and you've got like,
And they're like,
you've got a 6-year-old, so that's
360 minutes.
It was like
What?
it was like 281 minutes. 280.
What does that even
Oh
mean?
my God!
9
what?
hours? What? Oh,
Yeah,
that's not right.
goodbye. So
281 minutes. Enjoy this footage of NASCAR while you wait.
What?
no.
It
It looked awesome, and now that you brought that whole design element, Ed, now I'm like, I don't think I observed that, but yes,
For sure.
that's very cool.
in the cars portion of it, but it also reminds me of the Bugs Land in California Adventure. I know it's not there.
gone.
It's gone now. It was literally one of my favorite parts of the park, and it was partly because it was designed to be like your bug size. So it's all the big, all the lighting fixtures were these giant plants, and the rides.
Perspective, yeah.
Just like the
so
poles and
cute.
stuff that would hold up the lamps to be like a giant
straw. Oh,
or
God.
like
So
or like
good.
the animal cookies, cracker boxes that were the actual seats that you would
Right,
ride in the
on-
bucket.
Yeah. And then
That was a real pleasure to walk through a Bug's Life land every time I needed to get to someplace else and not
dare
stop at
you.
a single one of those kids' rides.
we would ride all of them for sure. Oh shoot, what was the caterpillar's name and his great German
Gustav?
accent or whatever?
Gustav?
Oh, I'm so hungry. I'm going to eat my way through a piece of watermelon or whatever the fuck. It was the greatest ride. It was like slow and sweet, and I don't know.
Was it Heimlich?
Heimlich?
Oh,
There
it
you
wasn't
go.
Gustav.
Which
sorry.
is hysterical because, of course, the Heimlich maneuver, and he's obsessed with food. That's amazing. Good job, Pixar.
Well, Ratatouille was awesome, and I, even the critic, that was probably another. I always kind of lean toward a slightly evil character, but then it has redemption.
Oh, because he's
Anton
so...
Ego, Peter O'Toole.
the
a classic.
best.
Oh, he's just warmed and melts with the
takes a
home
bite
cooking
of does it know?
Ratatouille, isn't it? No, what is it called? Why are you laughing?
That is what it's called. What's
It's
funny?
what it's called, but you're like Ratatouille. Like it's like question. It's like yes, that's what it's called. But I don't know why.
I thought it was a trick
I know, and I
question.
set it up like it was a trick question.
And I thought I was very confused.
And then you
I'm
got
like,
it right, and then I realized I shouldn't have asked it that way. So it's just a trick.
You're never gonna get it. It's not the
It's
title of the
not
movie.
the most obvious thing. the
No,
title
it
of the
was
movie.
Rat Stew.
Oh my God,
Obviously
that's
not.
so amazing. Well, and that was, you had animals and, Paris and human beings and just so many layers. And then the next movie that they did was probably, I would say if I have like a top 50 films, it's on the list. WALL-E.
Mm-hmm.
WALL-E is supremely enjoyable, and I have rewatched WALL-E again. despite the fact that it represents a terrifying future for humanity.
Which is, it is such a lesson in like overconsumption. It's so scary.
Well,
it's
one of those ones I would watch quite often with my kid. He was like the perfect age, but he wasn't getting the big themes.
for sure.
But now, he's 13 and can go on deep dives on YouTube and this and that. I'm like, Mom, you need to watch the thing about Wall-E. It's like,
What, like a video essay?
Yeah, it really becomes like the less I know, the better. But I mean, there's so much charm. Like to put that much charm on basically a robot and loneliness and, being able to dive into those, human emotions are put on something that shouldn't have them.
And what a feat to think like we can do this without language. We're not really going to use dialogue. It's just going to be like
very true. Yeah.
Like just little noises and sighs and like it's wow.
And, the explainers and the little videotapes to help you along. But yeah, Wall-E doesn't say anything. He says Eva. That's it.
Oh.
Eva. Wall-E.
Okay, let's nobody cry. Up.
For all the short parts of all the Pixar movies that are so poignant and telling and just get you right in the hearts.
I mean, they do that on purpose.
I can fully ignore that part of Up and really enjoy everything else about Up. I'm not into the feels. Get out of here, Up.
Oh, no. Speaking of Boy Scouts and parts of California Adventure that don't exist anymore, that Adventureland part, oh my God, it was so great. It was inspired by Up, this character
was it like the walkthrough?
Yes, it was like Adam really liked it because,
you had yearly passes, so you were able to go and explore areas of the park that on a much more regular basis.
You're not,
and you had a pass for a while too.
Yep.
John and I
actually have a pass
so
this year. It's the super, super limited Southern California. Goes 6 days this year.
So you're going right after this? Is
pretty
that
much.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, it was blocked out until 2 days after my birthday.
Son of a
Fine.
beep.
Oh, that's cool. I don't think I knew there was anything related to
it was
Up at the
so
park.
cute. It was like, I can't remember what it was called.
What are you talking about? Every single kid that's got a freaking balloon at Disneyland is related to Up. Send them off.
It was really cute, but they have repurposed it, I believe.
But it is like almost every kid's fantasy to think, if I got all these balloons, I could get out of here. I could get out of this jam situation. And Peter Docter, I think the first one he truly spearheaded. And, another one where it's like two old people are like the central characters.
Well, I think his first one was Monsters. Now, how much of that was like, usually the directors are incredibly important in the development of the story. Like that's just how their workflow is.
Right.
But yeah, go on.
No, I just, when you think about, we're going to make it an old man. I mean, and we're going to appeal to kids and it's going to, basically he's going to, dogs and, squirrel.
Oh, squirrel, for sure.
I mean, who doesn't say that?
Very distracting. But Doug, apparently appropriately spelled Doug, as in digging, the golden retriever. We now have a German Shepherd that I feel looks so much like Doug, although colored more black than
our sister's dog. You're right.
Every time, that's what I think of.
Honestly, the only thing that needs to happen is a really good fisheye lens photo, and you get the exact amount of Doug nose, and you nailed it.
That's very true. Yeah, but I mean, and there was peril, and there was so many elements to it.
Ostriches.
Hello, I am Doug. It is nice to meet you. There's a squirrel.
Oh, it is sad to think that so many kids, like, that Ed Asner has passed away, but that is a voice that they all have heard from that, not all kids, but that a lot of people, that is, the younger people, that's their reference point for Ed Asner.
Well, they've got that in Elf. So
that's true. Elf.
Pretty good stuff.
Okay.
For him.
Oh, Elf. We can't even.
That'll be another huge
episode.
fan for
Okay,
sure.
Yeah.
Apparently,
Ray's Pizza on 20th. Everyone says they're original. That's the only one.
Apparently, they showed Ed Asner the model for his characters. I don't look like that.
Well, I mean, maybe not.
But it also even the dynamic of a grandchild and grandparents, they kind of lean into that, even though that wasn't the exact relationship. But like I said, it lent to it on a lot of different levels of where age is not a factor when it comes to Pixar. Yeah. So, okay, so now we're at Toy Story 3. And this sort of, you've gone through now, a full journey with Woody and Buzz. And now they're in transition as characters because their boy is basically Andy.
Well, it's also
is moving on.
coming back to the first property of Pixar's before they were Pixar with Disney as like their partner. It was like Disney was like their big brother that was helping them put a movie out. Now they're a real name. They're their own thing. Yes, Disney is helping us still, but we're our own thing. So coming back to that same intellectual property of Toy Story, getting all the actors back was like, oh, that's actually amazing. Usually you don't get all the same crew back on an animated feature if you do a second one.
It's 95 to 2010.
And you got to
15 years.
You got to figure they were recording the audio for the first one to prove that it could be made well in advance of it actually getting distribution and coming out in 95. So you got to figure that's 20 years from start to then coming back and doing the voices. They're not spending 4 years doing the Toy Story 3 animation.
No, they've got it down.
They figured
a
lot of stuff out at that point. But they may
Right.
have taken years and have to have the audio recorded to get the animation down and figure out what they're doing and do the drawn versions before you do the computerized versions. So it's like 20 years later to get the whole cast back. That's freaking
Well,
amazing.
close. If not 20, pretty close.
some near production value,
a big gap.
But
That's
it was,
amazing.
the themes of rejection and transition and moving on are throughout it. And like I said, this is one of those things, as a parent, it hits you differently than your kid when you're watching it. And so in the end, when Andy is leaving for college and he ends up giving the toys to somebody else, like passes them on. I mean, you couldn't not sit there as a parent and you're like, your kid's like, why are you crying? And you're like, I don't want you to grow up. Like, what is happening? And it can relate to you think to yourself, like, where is that toy I had? And we had Buzz and Woody, the figure, the dolls, for a long time, and Ethan had his name on the boot. And then about 2 years after that, one of our nieces was very much into the movies, and Ethan had moved on, and we had to pass it on to her. And I think I cried. I was like, "What? This is childhood." Like, I go, Ethan, you don't want them anymore. He goes, no, Laura. It was Lauren, actually, our youngest niece. She wants them, and she's playing with them, and she has a the Joan Cusack character. Jessie
the cowgirl.
Just the cowgirl, which is an awesome character. So, so we gave it to her as a birthday present, and they were in still really good shape. And I said to our sister Virginia, the one rule is you can't give them because she's a cleaner.
Oh yeah, no. If you give them back.
She doesn't have an
if you're
ounce
gonna
of hoarder
get rid
in
of
her.
them,
So
yeah,
I
no.
said, if and when you're ready to move on from these, they need to stay in the family for the next generation because they're just the iconic.
Well, and if you know the stories of Toy Story 1, 2, and 3, by the time you get to 3, they're a big enough company. They're good enough at storytelling. They're threading so many of their features and worlds together that they embed in the second one just enough. Just enough. I mean, you already had a kid getting a space toy with his old school cowboy sewn together toy. When they finally kind of let you in on, that actually was like the mom's toys when she was growing up. And Jessie had the mom's name on the inside of Jessie's cap. So it's a generational pass down to the kid. So him passing it down. So similarly, like, not just a toy, it's a generational, like heirloom toy.
Right,
So
right.
the same way you'd want the real ones back from your sister in real life.
And no one wants to get put in a box in the attic.
No.
Now, it's interesting. Well, we can't do all of them, so we're kind of some of them we have to skip over. But Brave was one of those ones that hair was a big issue.
Super big issue. And also, that's one where, like you were saying, was it this? No, it was the another episode of Huge Fans. I don't know if you've listened to all of the episodes of Huge Fans at this point, but there's another episode where my sister Liz was talking about going and seeing something at a screener theater or a Producers Guild screening of a particular
Writers
movie.
Guild or
Writers
something.
Guild. at whatever point I was part of something, I got to go see a specialty 3D screening of Brave in like a Disney.
3D?
Yep, that was one of the big
okay.
things about Brave was it was a 3D movie. So they were like building up more of the world for you to see. So like the sprite that you follow in the movie, part of that is like, oh yeah, that's the weird new thing that they did in this one. That thing that looks like it's floating and moving through this space that's not attached to a body that you then say, oh, I believe that's in that space because I could see its feet hitting the ground. So, they definitely did more stuff in this one as well.
Well, you know what's interesting because this movie was 2012 and Steve Jobs died in 2011, and he had sold Pixar at that point to Disney because he wanted to control and know what was going to happen with it before he died. And you kind of go, all right, well, who's running the ship? You have the Imagineers at Disney, and then you have Pixar, which is a very kind of different culture and world. Like, how are you marrying those two? And then that has an impact on some of the movies that come out after. I think you can see a shift. I do. Is it for the better? I don't know. There are some movies I think really benefited from, and other ones you're like, okay, that, I don't know. Like, I think the expectation to churn out more movies accelerated at that point because it's all of a sudden you're part of the Disney machine.
Well, there's definitely like something to the look and style of Pixar before that that felt like a small production studio where they really, really cared about the story that they were picking, and that's the thing that they put energy and effort and their craft into, making sure that they had that story on lock and then move forward with the rest of the production company, the animation, and building up behind that. It's like at some point that storytelling mode changes from them telling the story and choosing to a collaborative effort where Disney and us are choosing these stories. Some of them are the stories that we chose. Some of them are the stories that they chose. But the production that comes out still looks like our small little production. It's still our little company that's making it look this way and has that feel and looks that way. So it feels like there's a new element to the storytelling that they're doing.
But I will say one of the better ones, or one of the best ones they've ever done, Inside Out.
Yeah.
And that came after the fact. And that
felt very Pixar. Yeah.
That was like the depths and the intelligence that was behind it to be able to say, we're going to go inside the mind of, a young girl and show all the elements of what a personality can be. I mean, don't we all, I as a family will go like, that's not going to be a long-term memory, or we're dropping that. It's
that's fading.
Yeah, that's fading.
That's not a core memory.
Or you go, this can be a core memory. And so there's just elements of it that, become part of the zeitgeist. And, when Ethan wouldn't get fed for a while, the hangry, they explode.
It's going to blow his top.
It's going to blow his top. Get that kid some food.
Little Lewis Black in there.
Yes.
Got very angry.
Exactly. So, and depression and,
interesting also the theme of just even growing up and that, that
sadness for no reason or is there a reason?
Yeah. And just very Pixar even if it feels like, the more they blended with Disney, things got a little bit more blurry of like, whose is this? Is this really? This felt like, oh no, this is definitely Pixar. This is
Peter Docter was involved, and I think it just was it was so incredible. And I remember Amy Poehler is sort of Joy, the main voice. Her doing an interview before it was coming out, like sometimes that will happen. Like I think was probably getting interviewed for another project, and you're on Pixar, a new Pixar movie, and she was trying to describe it, and she did a well enough job that you were intrigued, but you were like, what the hell? We're going to be inside the mind of a...
Frequently with Pixar, you're like, so what story? What? I know it's going to be good, but why would I want to see this?
Yeah.
Well, that one in particular really didn't feel like it was made for kids. And my daughter pointed out something. She said, kids actually are going through so much. They really do like a dramatic character that they can relate to. Like, you know,
You don't feel so alone.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, it's hard. I'm a kid. I'm in control of nothing. I actually get this.
Yeah.
More than like, you know, a parent's like, why do you got to be so dark? Why do you got to be so deep? I don't want to, like, can't it just be light and fluffy and easy and whatever? And kids are like, yeah, life ain't all easy down here. Thanks.
It's fabulous. Yeah. And then Finding Dory, I thought that was, you know, that was actually
nice to revisit those
yeah, I actually
characters.
thought that was one of those ones that, as a circling back around the Nemo property,
Universe, yeah. Mhm.
you know, I mean, the octopus character. I mean, there are some amazing elements, and actually, I think the aquarium that they based off of is in Northern California, the Monterey one, which I had just recently visited, and was like, damn, they did a really good job.
It's nice to have real world inspiration.
Yeah,
to pull
incredible.
from. And then revisiting Cars for Cars 3.
God, they just, you know,
But it's smart. I mean, you know, if you can figure out
Well,
another story to tell.
yeah, and you have like a whole world of Disney based off of it. Keep the next generation, a whole other group of kids
Well,
wanting to.
it reinvigorates that whole
Yeah.
area. But
Now,
then Coco, like completely original vibe.
Oh, and I don't know if I was enthusiastic about watching it for some reason. And we ended up watching it at home. And my father-in-law had just passed away. And I wasn't prepared. I know it was Day of the Dead.
Dia de los Muertos.
Thank you. And my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law and my son and my husband were all there, and we'd had Christmas brunch, and it was sort of like the downtime in between, and we thought, okay, let's watch it.
Light and fun, kids movie.
I thought so. Damn you, Disney and Pixar. Wowzers. I mean, what beautiful storytelling through the narrative of that family and their traditions, and not knowing a lot about it, even though growing up in Los Angeles, you know, we have a huge Hispanic, you know, Mexican heritage here. Community. So you think you know about it, but just to see that, and then, like I said, to have just had my father-in-law passed away and feel like, well, no, they're always still here with you. Forget it. Oh my God.
I know.
We were all a mess. It was like,
mean-
Merry Christmas.
Between Coco, Inside Out, and I'll come up with the other one. The way that Pixar develops these fantastical worlds, like, because they really do a great job of building up a whole universe for you to get into, right? But then for anyone to wrap their head around how your brain works and the different areas of your brain that get lit up when you do one thing and are down and off when you're doing something else, and then something can happen in your life and that whole part of your brain feels like it died. That, being able to translate that visually so that the audience can understand the story that you're telling, or like in, what was the movie that we're in, Coco, explaining as an artist, I'm looking at the story that they're telling and the way that they're telling the story and the details that are layered in the story that they're telling, and I'm trying to find a parallel in the visual that they're showing me. The story that they're telling in Coco is that souls exist and that there is an afterlife, and that the way the afterlife works is it's layers and levels, and it's about your presence in the real world associated with that, because that's the Dia de los Muertos energy and level of, you know, respecting your elders and your history and stuff like that. But that they had the deterioration of the entire universe of afterlife. So once you cross the bridge, every generation that's ever existed is represented. You can see it built up infinitely. You don't know how far that goes. You could see the older generations that aren't alive anymore, that don't have anything left to live for, that even can't, that like borrowing the guitar. He's like, I don't want to give up my guitar. I'm about to die the second death, and I still don't want to give up my guitar for you, who might have a shot. It's a very interesting way that they allow this concept or idea that has no real world representation fully to like live out and be represented and show you what's happening, what for the story. They touch in the real world and this ethereal fantasy world in their storytelling, and they do such a great job giving you a visual so you can really like get it. I get what you're trying to tell me with those.
Well, 100%. And I think that, those were sort of departure,
Oh, sorry. The other movie, I was sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The other movie was Monsters, Inc. Because when you dive into the other side of the door, under the bed, it's an entire universe that exists and functions and works properly and has like rules and stuff.
Well, they're really good at, Pixar is really good at designing the world that otherwise would not make sense. Like taking something really esoteric, like, how your brain works, and trying to put it into a way that kids could understand it. Same with
Core memories
yeah.
and all of those things.
Well, I don't want to say it was a palate cleanser, but the rumors, and then to actually have Incredibles 2 come,
Oh, yeah.
such joy. And they basically picked up right where they left off.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. Like no time had passed, and all the voice actors were able to play the
And
roles.
no change in the storytelling even. They this picked right up with this is the world we're in.
Brad
this is
Bird
the stories
again.
that we're telling. Yeah.
Yeah, Brad Bird again.
It was so that to watch those back to back. We did that a couple years ago. Just fantastic. Like that is just nothing but joy. And also women's, very, she's
Empowerment, sure.
empowerment, and there's just so many levels there that speak to modern issues. But they, once again, it's like, is this the 1950s?
It's a little dated, yeah.
What is happening? And then to wrap up Toy Story 4, Woody's journey, really, Woody and Buzz,
Yeah.
just incredible. Because you kind of, Toy Story 4, where are we going to go with this? Yeah, they were able to do it in a way that you felt like this makes sense. This is how you're going to wrap up the journey of these characters that we've all now, at that point, my gosh, how many years had it been? 20 years or something?
Yeah, 2019, so even more, because we're talking it was
Wow.
1995 was the first one,
Incredible.
so
Yeah.
close to 25.
And with Forky, because that was helpful.
Oh, Forky.
I mean, who in the writer's room went like, we basically need to create what kids do. They take a very inanimated, non-toy item
And turn it into something.
and turn it into something. And that's their favorite thing.
Well, on the other hand, that's every kindergarten teacher, their craft project. All right, you're taking a fork. We got the pipe
A
cleaner.
lollipop stick, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not all their
With
fault.
googly eyes
Yeah.
and yeah. And then as a parent, the pine cone that comes home all done up, that's like, let's have this as a center display for Christmas with googly eyes.
When can I get rid of
When
it?
can I? Yeah, but
But
putting
now,
value on something.
now you're like, oh God, am I throwing away Forky? Ay.
Oh my God. Toy Story. This is when my 13-year-old son still has stuffed animals. It's all your freaking fault, honest to God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Onward, what did you all think of that?
Well,
That I felt was maybe a little more Disney in tone.
yeah, but then again, still something very serious because
Oh,
it's
yeah,
about
the
the
dad
two
and-
brothers
yeah.
trying to get back to, having an opportunity to see their dad, who they, lost when they were very young.
Right.
And then, again, a little bit of cheating, but from this this TV series that, the short documentaries inside Pixar, or maybe it was a different, I can't even remember now where I saw it, but the main director of this one, it's based on his relationship with his brother, and he had they lost their father when he was only 1, and his brother
Ooh.
basically raised him. And during the process of making this movie, he purposefully did not tell his brother what it was about, so that, because it takes like 5 years or whatever. So he, was like, I'm doing this as a love message to my brother for basically, somebody said to him like, don't you miss your dad? He's like, no. And they're like, yeah, because your older brother was your dad. Like,
Also, 1 year old.
yeah, you didn't.
There's
he,
no
he said, I
memory,
didn't
really.
miss my dad because I didn't have a dad, but he had a dad and his older brother. Anyway, it was great. It was they're both on Disney Plus, the Pixar story, but I really think it's that Pixar short documentary series that I saw this one.
Well, this is an overall theme they have, which is death. From the
Yeah,
very
but-
beginning of the Disney world.
I was just gonna say, man, as much as you've heard about the Pixar campus, and they let people take like months off in between jobs to like go regen their like artist, spirit or whatever. there have got to be some sad panda pitch sessions.
Well,
of just the,
I mean,
I raised my younger brother, and I want to make a movie for him and not tell him that it's about
vice versa.
Yeah, but
It's
like
the younger brother.
The pitch on that is like, okay, here's
Well-
some money to make a movie, please.
I mean, it is true that they are purposefully trying to get at deeper themes,
For
which
sure.
you know.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Soul. And this was one that for sure I'd heard about before it was coming out. And you thought, what?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say I was resistant to see it. Sometimes I don't want to be like fed something or, like you're sort of like, I'm not ready for that. I don't know if I'm ready to think
What?
about my soul in the afterlife in an animation. Like,
Well, and especially like the idea that like you die feeling like you haven't gotten to do what you want to do,
Lord,
and then you struggle
yeah.
to come back. It's like, oh gosh, I don't know.
but
that seems hard.
wow.
Yeah.
This one it deserved all the accolades that it got for so many reasons. The music, the animation, the storytelling. Just like Ed said, you have the real world, but now you're going to go into the afterlife and the layers of afterlife.
Sure.
And
And for Pixar to design what that was going to look like is very interesting.
And that could have been, I'm sure it was, but talk about controversial because obviously depending on your religious belief or not, or what what you think of an afterlife. I mean, that's saying what someone's vision is, but also your kids are going to watch it and the impact they'll have on. So that was risky.
Yeah, well, at least, maybe start conversations with kids about what the afterlife
And
might
Pete
be.
Doctor again, I think he likes to do these,
It's kind of, It's kind of the theatrical, heavy-handed approach to a Sesame Street level. Let's talk about stuff. Sesame Street's like every
let's
day
get real.
we'll get to this topic. It doesn't have to be like the full-blown, you're going to experience the afterlife and all the layers of afterlife.
But when you think about
This 2-hour
Pete
journey.
Doctor, the one before it was Inside Out that he was, in charge of, and Up. I mean, he's taking on some of those very big life themes
For sure.
and questions and trying to explore or offer answers through this lens, which is totally incredible. They did such a good job. I think that was another one we watched on like a Christmas morning. I was like, jeez, can we have just a fun, where's Monsters Inc? Where's like, where's like the Incredibles?
Well,
It's going to be something fun.
The evolution of Pete Doctor, Monsters Inc. to Up to Inside Out to Soul. I mean,
Wow. Yeah.
Not
And he was one of the originals. It's like, you've been there a long time, dude. This is...
Well, he's won Academy Awards and well deserved.
No, of course.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
the awards, we're not going to list the awards for Pixar because we would
Don't
take up
have
the entire episode
another
for that
hour.
because they're all well deserved and they're in multiple categories of animation, even scripts, and the list would be too long.
Well, their latest and I think their last released, there's a couple, ones that haven't been released yet.
Oh, right.
Luca.
Luca.
Well, what I love about it is just how beautiful it was. Like they really did. They went and, to Italy and Mediterranean,
Capri and, like, yeah.
and we're like, ooh, let's really design it based on, they took a bunch of pictures. Like it's just, gorgeous.
we've been working at Pixar for how long now?
I need to go to,
I believe there's these great stories of our parent company, Disney, sending their animators to other countries to study
Let's
the
do
animals for like
that.
Lion King. Can we do that? Can we pick a script that says, no, you need to go to the Mediterranean? Oh, I'm gonna go to the Mediterranean for the script.
Well, it definitely gave me FOMO for travel because,
For sure.
it's, none of us have really traveled this last 2 years. And so to, Italy and just the coast of, and
it
oh
didn't
my
give you
God.
FOMO for a Vespa? Just a very
I've always wanted a Vespa.
How dare you?
I think I looked at my husband during it and I'm like, son of a, get me a freaking Vespa. But he doesn't want to be responsible for it. So he's like, you can
Which
get your
is
own
smart.
Vespa. I know, but we digress.
No, don't get a Vespa.
Oh,
Just
see.
look, I would be you'd have to wear a helmet and a full
Of course.
body armor.
First of all, you're not allowed to get one Vespa. You have to get 4 so we
Oh.
can ride around in style to our meetings and stuff.
I can totally
Obviously,
relate to you, Luca.
we're gonna have a
I want a
bungalow
Vespa too.
on multiple different studio lots, and we'll need a Vespa around to our different bungalows.
Exactly.
We got deals coming up.
Boom. Well, I thought it was very enjoyable, very escapism. Even some of the heavier, more adult elements were not so heavy. So it was very escapism.
Which is good.
It was just fun. It's like I said, some of their movies you feel like almost like a palate cleanser. Like, oh boy, we just did Soul. Now we're gonna do Luca.
Seriously. Okay, so I think we've hit all of the notes. Lightyear, which is now a
Coming
prequel
up.
spin-off of the Toy Story franchise, etc. I think it's pretty cool.
Buzz
If
Lightyear.
they do some kind of like heart-wrenching, emotional, brain trauma, parent dead situation, trying to learn us
It's
through
Pete
that.
Doctor.
I'm
Get
just
ready.
saying.
It could be.
Oh,
Oh,
you're
known.
gonna
He's
kill me
known.
with this. 'cause
well,
I'm
we're all
totally
gonna
go to
watch
that.
it. Well, look, that's Pixar. We are
And
huge
also,
fans. Yeah.
they also have another one in March coming up very shortly, Turning Red.
Turning Red. Do we know anything about it, John?
I mean, from the little I saw the preview, it was somehow I think a kid, losing control, morphing into an animal, like a little kind of a superhero animal transition.
Really?
Kind of like Jack, except if he just turns into a tiny bear.
Oh wow. Okay.
But I'm sure there's stronger emotional themes as well.
I mean, look, it's Pixar. There probably is. I wouldn't put it past them.
Well, that's how they'll keep generation to generation. I mean, because some of these, like I said, you can go back and go, Toy Story was in 1995. It holds up.
Oh, it holds
like
up.
there's
Yeah.
Monsters Inc. holds up. Finding Nemo, The Incredibles. So that's where, I would sit down. These are movies that I for sure, now they're mostly all on Disney Plus, so you're not really flipping the channels and just running across any of them anymore.
No.
But some of them are ones that I would definitely stop and, oh gosh, Wall-E, oh gosh, The Incredibles, oh gosh, you got me, Finding Dory or any of the Toy Stories are up. So I think they're going to stand the test of time because it's really good storytelling.
Yeah.
Then backed up by incredible animation and very different styles. And I think they're expanding their view, and you can tell with things like Coco and Soul, they're expanding and being more diverse.
And Luca.
And Luca.
Getting out of just
Yeah.
one kind of type of story,
Yeah.
one location.
Right. So I think all of that is like, there's so much to look forward to with Pixar. And as a viewer, it's like we're vested in the stories that they tell, and they kind of make up fabrics of their long-term memories, their core memories.
Their core memories.
Their core memories. There you go. So
I have one little last tidbit of a story to add to this. In college, because I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, in my senior year, the school had opened a theater up, and so we were doing like showing off our reels and stuff like that. And they actually got John Lasseter to come to the school and do a small presentation, and we got to watch Toy Story. It was weird because you've never experienced it this way. It was a real theater, not a movie theater. So the projector that they had to use to show us Toy Story was in the seats behind us. It was like 10 rows back. There was just a movie projector they brought in to film it. It's kind of loud. I did enjoy seeing that, and it was a very cool experience. But it was like, that's why they have a projecting booth. It's
they
a
gotta-
very, very loud, giant reels of film.
were
showing
you
us the
able to
movie.
do any Q&A with him afterwards?
Not like we were doing Q&A. I think he just did a little, a little bit with someone from the school, not the student bodies.
Nice. Okay. And nice. Well, that is Pixar's. Huge fans. So remember to like, subscribe.
Make sure
Follow
to
us on social.
follow us on all of our socials, and definitely comment on our podcast. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, we want your feedback.
Oh,
What are
yeah.
you huge fans of? What did you agree or disagree with us on
How
this
dare
topic?
you.
Yes. Okay, there you go. So we are
Huge fans.